Hello and welcome back to Chef Basics with me, Baz. This week we've got a nice easy one for you. We're making chocolate and vanilla shortbreads, or you could call these petit fours. We're going to use two different recipes here and they're coming up now, so pause the video if you want to take note of these. Now these are incredibly easy to make, but they do look impressive if done right. So let's get straight into it. We're going to start with the vanilla recipe, so let's just move these chocolate ingredients out of the way. And we'll start by putting the flour and icing sugar into a sieve and just sieve them into a bowl. Next up, we're going to add our diced butter, and you do want to make sure that this is cold, so keep it in the fridge until you need it. And we're going to use something called the rubbing in technique, and this is just where you put in the butter and then you pick up some butter and flour, rub between your fingertips and let it fall back into the bowl. And make sure you are keeping your hands out of that mixture, because if the heat from your hands heats this up, then it will become greasy and unworkable. Once all the butter's rubbed into the flour and icing sugar, you should be left with this dry crumbly texture, and you can go ahead and add in your vanilla extract. And next up, you want to separate your egg, and we're just going to be using the yolk for this, so keep the white for something else at a later date. And you're going to whisk that yolk just a little bit, because we're only going to use half in each of the two recipes. So now go ahead and add half of that yolk to your mixture, and you don't have to be too specific here, but just about half will do. And then you're going to work it together just lightly until it comes together as a dough. Don't overwork this, or your biscuits will come chewy rather than crunchy. Now that your first dough is ready, we need to rest it in the fridge and let it firm back up. So take some cling film or plastic wrap, place it on top, flatten it out slightly, fold it up and put it into the fridge for at least half an hour. So let's move on to the chocolate recipe now. You can start with your flour and icing sugar as before, but this time we're going to add some cocoa powder and sieve all of that together into a bowl once more. If you have any lumps of flour or cocoa powder left over at the end, you can just lightly push them through, and anything that doesn't go through you can just discard. Now with this recipe you want to give it a quick mix to make sure that cocoa powder is all evenly dispersed through, and then you can add your cold butter straight from the fridge once again, and you're going to do that rubbing in technique. And don't worry if it looks a little pale at first, it will darken as the mixture comes together. So now we have that dry crumbly texture like we had before, you can add the other half of your egg yolk straight to this, and again lightly knead it together just until it's all mixed in and you have a smooth dough. And same as the vanilla paste, this one needs to rest, so we're going to wrap it up and leave it in the fridge for at least half an hour, making sure you flatten it out again. This will just make it easier to roll later. After both of your biscuit doughs have rested for half an hour, you can take the first one out, and we're going to use about half of it for this first one. And the other half ideally keep in the fridge to keep cold, especially if this is your first time doing it and it may take you a little while. So anyway, flour surface, you can see I'm using baking paper to roll this out, that just helps me move it around a bit easier without using too much flour. And just roll this out fairly thin. There's no rules to this, I'm going for about 2mm thickness, but it's all about experimenting and finding something that you like. And we'll put that to one side for now, and then we're going to get our chocolate paste out the fridge, and we're going to use about a third of this for this recipe. And again, flour work surface, roll this out thinly too, and just try and get it to the same thickness as the white paste, but again it really doesn't matter how thick it is. So once you're happy with the thickness of your chocolate biscuit dough, just trim off all the sides, making sure that you've left it small enough that it fits on top of your vanilla dough, and keep all them offcuts. As you can see, I'll keep throwing them into this bowl because we're going to use them for something later. Anyway, now carefully lift up your chocolate dough and place it on top of your vanilla dough. I've actually rolled it out a little bit too big here, so I'm going to trim off a little more, and that can actually be kept for re-rolling later because it's a nice big piece. And we'll trim off the vanilla dough and throw that into the offcuts as well. Now place your chocolate dough on top of your vanilla dough, and you can start rolling this up using the baking paper to help. And notice that I've left a big gap at the top of the chocolate paste where it's just the vanilla paste, and that's just so that the chocolate paste stays encased in the vanilla and doesn't show through on the outside. This is going to create a nice chocolate spiral through the centre of the vanilla paste. Anyway, keep rolling this tightly until you can no longer see the chocolate paste within the vanilla paste anymore, and once you're there you can just trim off the excess vanilla paste straight and throw it in with the rest of your offcuts from earlier. And to seal this, we're just going to gently run our thumb over the seam like this until it feels smooth, and then that can go in the fridge to rest until we're ready to cut. The next biscuit we're going to make is the one with the checkerboard effect, so take half of your remaining chocolate dough and put the rest in the fridge. Now give that a sprinkling of flour, and we're going to roll that out into another thin sheet. Again, the thickness doesn't really matter here, I'm going for about 2mm again. Move that to one side for a minute, and we're going to roll out another piece of our vanilla dough, and this time we're going to leave it about 1/2 centimetre thick. Cut some strips out of it, you'll need at least 5, and then we're going to trim them so that they are square, so that is, they are as wide as they are thick. And now I'm just going to do exactly the same with our remaining chocolate dough. Now to assemble this, I'll start with one vanilla strip followed by one chocolate strip and end with one vanilla strip, and then on each of the vanilla strips I'll put a chocolate strip, and on each of the chocolate strips I will put a vanilla strip until I have a square of 3 by 3 strips. Now trim off the excess chocolate dough from each side of your pattern, and you're going to fold this over each time. If you find that it's not sticking to the pattern, you can lightly brush it with water and that will help it adhere. Once your pattern's fully encased, you can trim off the excess, and I'm going to keep this sheet here because I can use it again for something later. Now just seal the seam like we did for the first biscuit and put it in the fridge to rest. Next up, we're going to start with some white paste and just roll that to another thin sheet as we did before. And here's where we're going to make good use of all these offcuts. So you're just going to gently squeeze these together, making sure you don't overdo it, then roll them into a log, and you're going to place that on top of your white sheet. This is going to create a marbled effect when we cut these later. Now roll up until fully encased, trim off the excess white paste again, and then we can just seal that seam as we've done for the last two biscuits, and that can go into the fridge again. I actually made this one a little bit too long, so I'll cut some off and I'll put it into my discard pile for another marbled biscuit. So this one's the same as before, but instead of the vanilla paste around the outside, I'm just going to use the remaining chocolate paste to go around the outside. So trim off all of the excess, and we'll just squash that together again lightly, roll that into a log, place it on top and roll it up. Exactly the same process as before. And then that can go into the fridge to rest, and any remaining dough I'm just going to roll into a strip and leave it as it is. So after your dough's rested for about another half an hour in the fridge, it should have firmed back up, so get yourself 2 lined baking trays, and you're going to cut all of your biscuits into about 1.5 centimeters thickness. So there's the checkerboard one, and now we're going to move on to the spiral one, same thickness again here. And when you put these onto your baking trays, just make sure you leave a small space. It doesn't need to be too big because they won't spread much in the oven anyway. And if you're keeping yours the same size as mine, they'll take about 10 minutes. Now here's the first marbled one with the vanilla exterior. And now the chocolate marbled one. And of course I also have just the marbled piece that I had left over that I cut off camera. And here they all are when they're cooked. You'll notice there isn't any colour to them, and they may feel a little bit soft when they first come out, but they will harden when they cool down, and you should be left with a nice crumbly biscuit. Remember, if you like this kind of thing and want to see more, leave me a like, subscribe, and I'll see you next week.